All right, I saw Fitz is here. Fitz is the sponsor of tonight's live. Thank you, Fitz. Everybody give Fitz a big thank you. Hey, Robert Chapman. Hey, Jessica. Mama. 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 Hey, Bernard. Hey, Vanetta. There's an echo. Is anybody else getting an echo? Hey, Trash Hunter. How's the... Am I echoing? You just watching the opening of the Olympics? Other people are saying no echo for them. Trash Hunter's saying the sound is bad. What? No. Hey, Bobby. I love that Heather Cox Richardson, Bobby. She is great. Hey, Lars. Hey, Vanetta. Effin' hell. The sound has resonance. There is a deep resonance. Hey, G2. Hey, Mad Mike. Hey, Nightshade. All right, well, the peeps are coming in. And Fitz has mentioned already the Summer Olympics have opened in Paris, right? Hey, Rob Walker. Happy Friday. And it is important to note that ahead of today's Olympic Games opening in Paris, a coordinated acts of vandalism resulted in damage to the high-speed rail lines in France and causing major delays. French authorities say that the attacks were well coordinated and targeted based on a deep knowledge of the French rail system. As to the theories as to who is behind these attacks, these acts of vandalism ahead of the Olympics, Russia tops the list, of course. Russia, we know, has a concerted disinformation campaign aimed at denigrating and casting scandal upon the Olympic Committee. We know that they are pissed off because they are not invited, that the 15 Russians who are participating are there under neutral country flags, and the Russians are not happy about it. Also, this is coming right on the heels of the failures of the BRICS games, where Brazil, Russia, India, and China and South Africa have their own games. But nobody gives a fuck, and nobody goes to them. The failure of the BRICS game was highlighted in the ridiculousness of the Russian 100-meter freestyle winner standing with his gold medal on a platform with no bronze or silver because he was the only competitor. Ridiculous. But the Russians are not the only suspect in this. The Israelis claim that they have solid evidence that Iran was behind it. Now, the news is reporting this as if that means that there are two suspects, Russia and Iran. As far as I'm concerned, that just confirms that there's only one suspect, and it's Russia, acting through its proxy, Iran. But hang on, we're not done, because French officials are saying that they believe that it's likely a far-left French movement, a native domestic terrorist attack. Especially given the knowledge of the French rail system, which apparently the communications lines that they hit exactly the lines to do the most damage with the least amount of work. So we don't know who's behind this attack on the opening day of the Olympics, and no one has taken credit for it. And so that all remains to be seen. Ukraine has hit another Yastreb-AV. This was in Donetsk. This is a rare counter-battery system priced at about $250 million USD. It's the third that the Ukrainians have destroyed since the start of the full-scale invasion, totaling $750 million in lost Russian hardware. This is according to Stratcom, the Strategic Communications Department of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, that released a 1-minute and 7-second video on Telegram today showing the destruction of this counter-battery equipment. We don't know when exactly it was destroyed. But again, according to the MOD, it's the third that they've taken out. Now, Putin recently met with Orban in Moscow. Narendra Modi, leader of the world's largest democracy, went to Putin and embraced him in Moscow. Oh, hey, the power is back on. Hallelujah. Thank you, Jesus. And so Putin is making a concerted effort for the world to see him as a world leader rather than just a genocidal lunatic with regional influence, which I think is much more what he is. As part of this tour, Assad from Syria was in Moscow. This is the first time he's been there since March of 2023. And he expressed his concerns over escalating and widening conflicts during the meeting in Moscow with Vladimir Putin. It's possible that one of the things that they were talking about was smoothing relationships with Turkey. Turkey and Syria have had their problems. Those problems have often resulted in armed conflict at the border or cross-border, and even to Turkey holding a little bit of what might be called Syrian territory. Erdogan has signaled a willingness to talk to Syria, but no plans were made or announced. It is worth noting that what we see the Russians doing here in Ukraine looks very much like clinics and medical facilities. They destroyed the infrastructure of their own people because that's a civil war, right? Water and energy infrastructure were primary targets of that campaign, as well as the kind of block by block artillery leveling of towns so that enclaves of resistance were simply destroyed and made untenable for those that lived in them. Additionally, we saw chemical weapons attacks in Syria. Assad used chemical weapons on his own people. And we see the need. David Fraser, just yesterday, who's here tonight, hey David, highlighted the need for gas masks in this country and how the guys on the front line need those gas masks. If anybody's got a source of gas masks, hook up with David Fraser there. He's getting gas masks to the front line. And I think maybe too, David, are you raising some money for gas masks, maybe? I would point out, so is Hamish de Breton Gordon, who is a former tank commander for the British Armed Forces. And this problem with gas masks in Ukraine is getting a high level of attention these days. I mean, given that the Ukrainians have documented 3,000 cases of chemical weapons use by the Russians since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, should tell you just how desperately we need gas masks here. This really burned my ass, boy. This next bit here. This was Putin. Putin said the words, this is a direct quote, "Those who try to intimidate people, to split our society, to play on religious or national feelings will never succeed. Inevitable and just retribution awaits them." So he's talking about people who are trying to sow division inside of Russia. Now, I'm sorry. You've got to be kidding me. For 20 years, the Russian disinformation fire hose has been spraying into the lives of us here in the West doing exactly what Putin is now accusing us of doing. It's insanity. It's insanity and hypocrisy of the worst sort. And he absolutely deserves to have karma turn this around and visit it on him and his people. But he is vowing retribution. He couldn't even handle the Azeris in Armenia. I mean, come on. He hasn't even told China yet that that island that they grabbed isn't theirs. He's kept his mouth shut about that because he's so dependent on the Chinese. Weak. Kuleba has visited Hong Kong after meeting with Xi and getting Beijing's promises not to provide lethal aid weapons to Russia, and acknowledging, just as the United States does, the one China policy, dealing with Beijing as China. He warned on his visit to Hong Kong, he highlighted and warned that Hong Kong is a route to evade Russian sanctions. And he called on the people of Hong Kong to not try to evade those Russian sanctions and not try to assist Russia in unaliving Ukrainians. Now, as we all know, as I reported yesterday, there was a large attack in the Prokof's direction. 45 APCs, 12 tanks, one BMP Terminator, and about 100 dismounted infantry. I spent some time today listening to analysts, including Chuck Farrar, who's a former SEAL Team 6 group commander, and Professor Michael Clark, who's the former director of RUSI, which is the Royal United Services Institute, like, sort of like the American Museum of the Armed Forces, right? So it's an academic institution dedicated to understanding the art and history of conflict. And among others, these were two, but I have quotes from these guys about what's happening out there that I think are very telling, particularly with Professor Clark. Professor Clark went to some length to talk about the size and scale of this offensive, as well as the recent history of Russian offensives. What we've been seeing is small attacks by dismounted infantry, right? So just a company group of guys, say 30 guys, just running across a field to attack Ukrainian positions. And in so doing, revealing the firing positions of the Ukrainians for artillery to then target them and take them out. That in the first wave of attacks, what the Russians are doing is literally throwing men against the line in order to determine where the Ukrainian guns are and then send the artillery after them. Tough gig, right? He said that then once those Ukrainian firing positions have been eliminated, they'll send in larger groups of dismounted infantry to flush out more of these guys. And then eventually, when they're ready for the big push, they think they can do the breakthrough. That's when they get back into their armor and they do these big pushes. The fact that the push was unsuccessful, the fact that it broke and retreated, not both, but both Clark and Farrar and others that I listened to said the same thing. They had 40 good vehicles still. Yeah, they lost 6 tanks, but they only lost 7 armored personnel carriers. They still had 38 armored personnel carriers. They still had 6 tanks. They still had that BMP Terminator. And yet they fled. They fled. There's no reason that they should have fled. They still had 40 armored vehicles to go against those Ukrainian positions. They outnumbered the Ukrainians, probably 3-1, and had 40 armored vehicles. Why did they run when they had those initial losses? In the words of Michael Clark, if this were an American group and they got their nose bloodied, they wouldn't have stopped. They'd have punched right through because they still had 40 working vehicles. Chuck Farrar said something similar. They were drunk. Maybe they were drunk. I don't know that to be true. But according to the experts, they should have won that engagement, and instead they ran in defeat. Out of fear of the Ukrainian precision munitions, at the staggering troop losses maybe. It's been reported that of the 100 dismounted infantry, 53 got out of there alive. So substantial casualties. But they were mostly hunted down by drones during retreat, not in the initial engagement. Now, this is all critically important because what the attack was focused on was cutting the road, the communications line between two principal logistic hubs for Ukraine in the east, between Prokofsk and Chasiv Yar. Michael Clark went on at some length describing how the number and frequency and severity of attacks in Chasiv Yar have diminished over the last 2 weeks. And he attributed that to logistics strikes in the rear, to HIMARS hits on critical rail lines and critical rail infrastructure that have prevented the Russians from getting ammunition and other supplies to the front line at Chasiv Yar, thus forcing them to scale back their offensive maneuvers in that area. Then he said something, you know what, I'll save that for last. So the analysts seem to agree Russia is not capable of doing modern, complex maneuver warfare. They have lost that ability through the attrition of the educated and disciplined officer corps, many of whom are never coming home from Ukraine. They have done that through the rapid deployment of untrained troops and other command and control failures. Even just this attack, Chuck Farrar chided them for not performing this attack at night when it would have had a better chance of success, but instead doing it in the day because the Russians lack the night vision technology to pull off such a coordinated effort. We just saw a number of nighttime attacks up in the Kyiv direction in which the Russians ended up shooting each other. Companies on night maneuvers coming across each other in the dark, and bang, friendly fire incidences up in the Volchansk direction. Chuck Farrar went on at some length to point out that Russia really has no strategy to win, and we see that this notion is commonly repeated by the analysts. One thing that Michael Clark said that really depressed me, depressed the shit out of me. He said things may get better for the Ukrainians by spring of 2025. And that I got to tell you, that did depress me, because the Ukrainians are really taking it on the chin out there. And the idea that they're going to have to keep this up for another 8 months, maybe, is tough. It's a tough thing. Yeah, Maddie, say your prayers. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians do continue strategic long-range attacks to make Crimea untenable for the Russians. An attack and strike against the Saki airfield, according to the pro-Ukrainian outlet Krymsky Viter, they have made the claim that air ammo depot was hit, and that the cook-off ignited air-to-air missiles in nearby bunkers, sending them flying willy-nilly into the air over Saki airfield. UNIAN news outlet in Ukraine confirmed these claims and added that an S-300 battery and a ground radar belonging to the Russian aerospace forces were also hit. Now, curiously, the mill blogger, the pro-Russian mill blogger, Fighter Bomber, reported on this hit as well. And made an homage to eternal memory. Now, that phrase, eternal memory, when the Russians use it, is generally used as a term of sympathy when a pilot has been killed in a plane crash or when a vehicle is downed by air defense. That would lead one to believe that in addition to the ammo depot, the missiles, maybe some airplanes, maybe some pilots were also lost in the attack on Saki airfield. Saki maintains dorms and barracks for pilots. And so it's entirely possible that Russia lost some pilots in this attack, though we don't know that to be sure. Fighter Bomber went on to complain that the Russian high command should have seen this coming. That after the Su-27 that had intercepted the British recon mission 2 days ago over the Black Sea, clearly this was exactly the kind of thing that recon mission was trying to map. They gave the target to the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians took advantage of it. And Fighter Bomber blames Russian high command for this failure and complained bitterly about it at some length. The Royal United Services Institute, right? That's the British Armed Services Institute, held its 2024 Land Warfare Conference this past week, at which Admiral Sir Tony Ratican of the British Navy said that Russia could return to full strength in just 5 years if the fighting were paused. If the fighting were paused, he said that despite their significant losses, they could return to full-scale invasion strength of February 2022 in less than 5 years, which should be of concern to Europe and all her allies. Now, curiously, one of the statistics that he mentioned, based on British intelligence, was that the Russians have lost 550,000 men in Ukraine, which is remarkably close to the Ukrainian estimate of 563,000. Remarkably close. The Economist has reported that figure is likely between 462 and 728,000 men permanently removed from the battlefield in Ukraine. Huge. I mean, these are World War II numbers. It's outrageous. An aide to Orban has accused Kyiv of blackmailing Hungary and Slovakia over the shutdown of the Lukoil pipeline. Well, yeah. And don't you think you deserve it, you sons of bitches? I mean, you've had 2.5 years to get off that pipeline. You got the Transalpine pipeline. You got a pipeline coming in through Croatia. There's no reason for it. You could have been off it. Why are you continuing to fund Vladimir Putin's war against Ukraine? That the Ukrainians are the ones who should be complaining. Now, on top of this, we got a really interesting story coming out of Budapest. that Hungary took out a 3-year loan from some Chinese banks in the amount of $1 billion. And this loan has been hidden. Now, this is supposed to be a government loan, right, to the Hungarian government. You would think there would be some accountability, some transparency, that you would have to tell the people you were borrowing $1 billion from the Chinese. But somehow, the whole thing's been kept a secret. I wonder why. Could it be that Orban is flying to Moscow because he's counting on his good buddy Vlad to bail him out of this? Right? To do something valuable enough for Vlad that Vlad will pay off this $1 billion with the Chinese in Russian oil or some shit. I don't know the answer to that, but it does make one wonder. The U.S. and Canada scrambled their fighters after 2 Russian and 2 Chinese bombers entered the Alaska Air Defense ID zone, which is in international airspace, but it's close enough for us to worry. How do we know it was done in secret? Because it's only just been revealed, and it was revealed through a leak in Orban's own government. If Orban ended up like Yanukovych, I think it would be the best thing for the Hungarian people, that's for sure. Okay, now here's the thing. Here's the thing about the Chinese-Russian interception in Alaska. As I understand it, in the Strategic Air Command in Alaska, there's a map on the wall. And the map shows all the places where Russian fighters have intercepted American fighters, and American fighters have intercepted Russian fighters. And it happens all the fucking time. And with a little bit of luck, there's no damage to anybody's aircraft, and the pilots get a good story to tell. It's the kind of thing that happens. It goes on, right? But this is the first time in history that it's ever happened with a couple of Chinese bombers flying with a couple of Russian bombers. That has never happened. And the response, there's never generally a reason for both the Canadians and the US to scramble their fighters. But in this case, both Canada and the US chose to scramble their fighters and intercept. And it does seem to me that if we had dealt with Putin in Ukraine and defeated him by giving the Ukrainians what they need to win, he wouldn't be fucking around in Alaska with the goddamn Chinese. They wouldn't have the balls to do this shit if we had shown them here, now, what we are capable of. So expect more of this, America, because if you don't deal with fucking Putin, he's going to see you as weak. The UK, now this is very interesting. Everybody knows about Dragonfire. Dragonfire is the UK directed energy weapon that I think it was Lord Cameron was talking about trying to get a prototype to the Ukrainians to try to use in the field to take out drones. Fires laser beam at a drone, high intensity directed energy weapon, and it costs about £5 a shot. The thing is, I want to say it's a 1 megawatt, or no, it's a 750 megawatt or kilowatt, 750 kilowatt directed energy weapon, and so it's big and it's made to be ship mounted. The British have just released video of a scaled down truck mounted version that fires a single directed energy beam for about the cost of a cup of tea, is what they are saying. So the UK has successfully tested a laser weapon in acquiring and destroying drone targets. It's a lightweight, high-energy laser, truck-mounted, that costs, about a cup. It is not Dragonfire. That's the point. It is not dragon fire. The British MOD is saying that while this was a successful test of the prototype, the idea of deploying it to Ukraine is probably a year to 2 years away. So now that's the official line from the MOD right now. There are voices inside the British military that are saying, no, we should send it to Ukraine and let them battlefield test it. And we'll get real learnings. Who says the United States doesn't have laser weapons, Bobby? We have laser weapons. We invented laser weapons. Okay. Putin. This is hysterical to me. Putin has predicted that Zelensky will be ousted by his Western backers. Even in the narratives that Putin weaves, Ukraine doesn't exist. It doesn't have any will of its own. It's just a puppet of the West. And we're going to get rid of Zelensky. We're going to get tired of Zelensky. We're going to get rid of Zelensky. And Zelensky has no legal authority after May 20th of this past year. And so his Western backers will convince him to fight to the last Ukrainian until there is no Ukraine left, and then the West can just take over here, I guess. In an interview in Ukrainiform, sorry, not an interview, but in an article in Ukrainiform today, they wrote about yesterday's frontline attacks. According to the Ukrainian MOD, the fighting is heaviest in the Pokrovsk region. On 7/25, on July 25th of 2024, the Ukrainian armed forces repelled 147 combat engagements of the Russian armed forces. The Russians launched a single missile. They launched 90 airstrikes and 151 gliding aerial bombs. 4,900 shells, so about 5,000 artillery shells a day. Now, this did include 104 MLRS attacks, multi-launch rocket systems attacks. For their part, Ukraine made 17 strikes on troop concentrations of the Russian Federation forces, hitting artillery vehicles and ground radars. The fighting is intense. It is intense up and down the line, and this grinding attritional battle continues. It is believed that the Russians are losing men at a 3-to-1 rate, but those casualties are very high for the Ukrainians. It is important to remember that this war is not merely measured in hours, minutes, and days, but it's measured in lives and blood and limbs. And the Ukrainians are suffering. The Pentagon has done it again. They calculated the price of a number of weapons heading to Ukraine at the replacement cost rather than the depreciated value. And so suddenly the Pentagon has found $2 billion worth of aid that it can send to Ukraine. Well done. Love the auditors at the Pentagon. We heard some talk yesterday about a car bomb of a Russian officer in Moscow who lost his feet, and his female companion suffered shrapnel wounds from a terrorist car bombing. No one has taken credit for that. However, the FSB have in custody, they have arrested a Russian citizen for that car bombing, and they claim that he has confessed that he was hired by the Ukrainian SBU to commit that bombing. You can take that story with a grain of salt, a pound of salt, a bunch of salt, however you salt your salt. it is, of course, most likely that that person is just a patsy who will fall to the swift justice of the Russian Federation, whether or not he had anything to do with it. Okay. Guys, that's my top line stories. So just before we go to Q&A, let me take a moment and thank Fitz, who is the sponsor of tonight's live. Thank you, Fitz. I also want to thank the moderator team, Cheyenne, Vanetta, PT, John Williams, J, and Travis. You guys are literally the best moderators on the Tickety Talk. I want to thank Nightshade, who has the Peters Peeps group. I want to thank Vanetta Laird, who has the Dismantle Project 2025 group on the Book of Faces. Please join us there. Thanks, Jedi. Damn right. Thank the mods. Thank Fitz. Love it. Thank Warren Zevon, too, and the Werewolves of London. His hair is perfect. And I think that's everybody, right? So we can go to Q&A, questions, comments, points of observation, or personal need. Anything from anybody about anything. It is Friday, and guys, I'm sorry. I'm going to stop doing the Saturday show. I'm going to stop doing the live feed on Saturday. It's too much. It's just too much. And so we're going to go Monday through Friday, and then if something exciting happens on a Saturday, well, that'll be different. But for the most part, I'm gonna be taking Saturday and Sunday off moving forward. Now tomorrow, of course. Sorry, thirsty. Now tomorrow, of course, is the last Saturday of the month. And so we've got Laughter is the Best Medicine Kyiv from Gonzo Bar Padil. If you are in town, please stop by. If you are not, join us on the live feed. I need to take care of myself. Yes, I do, Vanetta. So I'm taking Saturdays off from now on. The U.S. shouldn't be charging Ukraine aid at replacement cost. Deprecation should be applied. Correct, PT. And that's how we got an extra $2 billion. It's not really extra. It's just the accounting thing. Yes, Walter, we will be doing comedy shows. Tomorrow is the next one. That's 7 p.m. live streaming here. Eastern European time, 5 p.m. London, noon New York, and Bobby, you're going to have to get up awful early for the jokes at 9 a.m. left coast time. Harris versus Trump, Ukrainian reaction. Paul, I haven't really been out talking to. Normally, right, I see my Ukrainian colleagues on Saturdays and Sundays. The comedy guys I see during the week, but they don't talk much about politics. So I can't say, Paul, that I have any. I don't have a sense of it. I won't until after this weekend when I get out and see a few people. Thank you, Simon. I appreciate that. Would Ukraine need ground-based vertical launch systems? Mel, I don't even know what that question means. Launch systems for what? Remember, I am not a military or weapons guy. Maybe PT, can you tackle that? Do you know what that question means? Right, Bernard, thanks to the team that makes this possible, because it's a team effort, boy. I mean, look at me. I'm a disaster. You don't think I could pull this off by myself, do you? Get the fuck out of here. Yeah, Bobby, we'd all like to see a lot of things, but Harris is beating Donnie in the polls. Is she? I know it looked that way initially. But then I thought there were a bunch of polls that came out later this week that said it was a little bit closer than maybe we thought. If China is caught giving the Russian military intelligence, what happens? Oh, I don't think they'd know what to do with intelligence. Do you, Jedi? That was a Russia joke. I doubt very much. I'm certain that the Chinese are giving the Russians intelligence. What are we going to do about it? We give the Ukrainians intelligence, God knows, right? We got Reaper drones flying over the Black Sea all the time. You got the British out there in their C-135s. You got etc. So that's a tricky business, boy. I don't know, Jedi. I do not know. You're the best, Bobby. Night, Bernard. Hey, Aunt. You have any sirens down your way? We got nothing here tonight. Surface-to-air missiles. Well, Mel, I would guess that if the surface-to-air missiles were gifted, you would gift the launchers, too. Otherwise, what good are they? Putski the Hog Boy. Hey, Joe, what do you know? Yeah, I didn't understand it either. Hey, Van, thanks, pal. Yeah, you can send me jokes. I'm not promising to use them. But, Bobby, if you send me some jokes and I like them, all you got to do is tune in and you'll see them in my set, probably. You do have the greatest mods, all in caps. Time to see an optometrist, Simon. Was it a Reuters poll, Vanetta, that showed Harris trailing Trump? That is my worry. Is America going to vote for a woman? Especially in the current anti-woman climate. You don't need launch tubes for lasers. That's silly. Russia's advance in Donetsk is failing. Well, that's an interesting question, Paul. Russia is advancing in Donetsk. So doesn't that mean by definition that they're winning? Right? If they're advancing, and they've recently had some actual advances, like 7 kilometers in 6 days. Now, it's a very narrow advance, right? It's a skinny little corridor. But there are 2 of them, and they are threatening to encircle battalions of the 31st Mechanized Brigade. That's a concern. That's a concern. So while I don't think I can say that the advance is failing because they are advancing, I can with confidence tell you that it's costing them huge losses we would never find acceptable. Never. Wishing all the Ukrainian Olympians the best of luck. Darn right. 48-47 Trump. Ugh. WSJ has Kamala ahead. Does China have good intel satellites? That's a great question, Bobby. I would think so, but they've definitely had some trouble with their space program, too. I don't know, like, how they compare to ours. It's a good question. PT, do you have any insight in how China's intelligence satellites compare to ours here in the West? No sirens in Odessa today. It's kind of strange, to be honest. That's a kind of strange I could get used to in a heartbeat. How about wood jokes? Here's a wood joke, Bobby. Bobby's so old he hasn't had wood since Grover Cleveland was president. Da-dun-dun. Coordinated Russian attack on the French railway system. This is serious. Did you mention this yet? Ivan Black, we did talk about this. I don't know that we know that it's Russians. The Israelis say that they have evidence that it was Iranian. And then again, the French authorities say that they have evidence that it was a left-wing French group, a domestic terrorist. Now, whether it was a far-left group in France or the Iranians, that doesn't mean that the Russians didn't fund it or supply it or encourage it or whatever. We just don't have the evidence that that's the case. Seen a video that Germany with an 8x8 with a 155 millimeter cannon that can hit targets while it's moving. With an 8x8. Is that wheels like 4x4, only 8x8? Can that move in 8 dimensions? No, probably not. Yeah, dude, send dad jokes, anything. The comedy will be streamed live here on this TikTok channel, Jedi. My understanding is that Harris has now raised $300 million. It's like that's almost $100 million a day. 75, right? 75 million a day. Unbelievable. Yeah, Jedi, tune in, man. The Ukrainians are doing a good job. Our regular crew of Nada and Tatiana is just Nada. Tatiana is in Germany for the summer. And so we have a couple of guests in, a Ukrainian by the name of Sasha, who was with us for our very first show back in February, and a British guy named Jerry, who will not annoy you at all because he hardly has a British accent. Yeah. And a guy named Johnny Jen is coming in to be our guest opener. He's going to do the opening stand-up set. $58,000 new volunteers. Maddie, the last number I saw was 74,000 volunteers have signed up. Where's here on this TikTok channel, Maddie? We stream it live here on the Tickety Talk. Eli is saying that she saw a source that claimed the 31st Brigade got out of that pincer, that they avoided encirclement. Only one source, though. The only source that I saw on this, Eli, said that the 47th Mechanized Brigade tried to get them out and failed. So I'm sure the situation is fluid, and we'll get some more clarity over the weekend. Kamala supporters did break Zoom, and because you're a candidate for president of the United States, you can just pick up your phone and call the CEO of Zoom and say, hey, buddy, can you cloud burst us a little bit? And the next thing you know, you got 44,000 people in there. Ta-da! And have raised a whole bunch of money. Is the Donetsk advancement not a predictable meat grinder a la Bakhmut? I'm not sure what that means, a predictable meat grinder, Paul, but it's certainly costing the Russians an awful lot. An awful lot. Hey, Dan Ballard, how you doing, pal? Oh my God, Paul, I can't believe you went with the Natalie Wood joke. What kind of wood doesn't float, Natalie? Low blow, ask my girlfriend. Well, it would have to be a low blow. Wheels 8x8. I mean, all those years of gravity, Bobby. All those years of gravity. Jedi says, I hear Putin wants the young people to join the government instead of going to the university. That's not exactly what I heard. What I heard is that there is currently a campaign to tell graduating high school seniors in Russia not to go to university, but instead go to work in the defense industry. Get right on the production line, making shells, making guns, making weapons. That's where he wants them at. Hi, Weibo. Why did Natalie Wood shower on the boat? She'd rather wash up on shore. Oh my God, that's terrible, dude. Harris is definitely getting the Swifties. Definitely getting the Swifties, no doubt about it. Hey, Parda. You were on that call, Maddie Wright. Were you? That's awesome. Dennis Davidov said that they got out. And somebody else is also saying that, and there was another source, PT, that said they avoided encirclement. Excellent. Thank God. What qualities is a workforce without good education? Putin doesn't think long term. He's not a strategist, right? He's a judo guy. He takes advantage of an opponent's weakness in the moment. His thinking is for short-term, unenlightened self-interest. I am barking mad. Paul, all of your jokes are for Americans of a certain age. Like, Ukrainians don't even know who Natalie Wood, or Grace Kelly are. I told a bunch of Ukrainians that my father was at Grace Kelly's wedding, and they were like, oh, nice, who's that? Anyway, I got them all, Paul. You'll be happy to know. So, guys, it's almost the top of the hour. Just before we call it a night here, I want to thank again, a special thanks to Eric, Dark Irish Fitz, who is the sponsor of tonight's live. I want to thank the moderator team, Cheyenne, Vanetta, PT, John Williams J, and Travis for all of their work. I really appreciate you guys. I want to thank Nightshade, who has the Peters Peeps group, Vanetta, who has the Dismantle Project 2025 group. And with that, are there any thoughts? Any final thoughts? Chris Carter is the sponsor of Monday's Live. And then we're out of live sponsors. If anybody wants to sponsor, hit me up. The Patreon is down. I am down from making about $1,400 a month to $1,200. That $200 makes a difference. So if anybody can maybe do what Bobby did and Ballerina did and slightly up their membership on Patreon, that would be great. There are all new levels to look at there. Or if you have not joined the Patreon, please do, even if it's only as a free member, so that you can follow the Dismantle Project 2025 project. Good night. Yeah, no, it's a whole nother world over here, man. Trying to do comedy without the cultural references is tough, boy. It's tough. Or maybe I'm just no good at it. Could be that too. Thanks, G2. Thanks, Van. Thanks, Vanetta. Thanks, everybody. Good night, everybody. Wouldn't that be great if Trump dropped out and let Marjorie Taylor Greene run? That'd be ideal. Or even if he just replaced J.D. Vance with Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, it's no difference, right? It's just more chaos among the Republicans of their own creation. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of myself and the moderator team, thanks you all so much for joining us this evening. We sure do appreciate it. Thanks for being there for me. Without you, I couldn't be here for you. So thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Make it a great day, everybody.